I have this message titled Expectation versus Reality. So, raise the hands. Who had to take a detour to get here this morning? A majority of people, right? Why? Because Rapids Road has been under construction since March. And it's going to be going on for another few weeks yet. But it's nice to see the pavement. It's nice to see a lot of that stuff getting done. And that detour that we had to take, because most of us probably live here in Manitowoc or the surrounding communities, it's not much of a detour. It's maybe adding a couple extra minutes onto your trip here. It's manageable, right? That's something that's predictable. It's manageable. You know it's going to be 2, 3, maybe 5 minutes extra onto your trip. But on a long car trip, those delays can be just a little bit more than a minor inconvenience. So who has here been on a long car trip? I'm talking like 8+ hours. A lot of people. All right. So on a trip like that, we may face unexpected events. We may face detours, traffic, roadblocks, making the wrong turn somewhere, or even tollways. And those soak up time. They soak up your resources, like money and gas. And they can also add some stress, am I right? And as I prayed about today's message, a couple weeks back, I was praying, God, what do you need me to speak on today? And he laid on my heart this analogy of a car trip. And in relationship to describing it as our faith walk. And just like a long trip, our faith journey will encounter detours, roadblocks, wrong turns, and costs. And I categorize these as the 4 Ds. Detours, delays, decisions, and discipleship. 4 Ds. So let's talk about faith. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith brings our hopes into reality and becomes the foundation needed to acquire the things we long for. It is all the evidence required to prove what is still unseen." This verse shows that faith is not just a temporary feeling, but a strong belief in what God has promised. It also means having a deep conviction that doesn't need visible proof, trusting completely in God's faithfulness. And Jesus also touched on faith in Matthew 17, verse 20. And he said, "If you have faith inside of you, no bigger than the size of a small mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move away and go over there,' and you will see it move. And there is nothing that you couldn't do." This verse highlights the incredible power of the smallest amount of faith, encouraging us to trust God's ability to move the mountains in our lives. And when we go on a car trip, we have faith that the car will start. We have faith that when we go, we have enough gas. The gas tank that we have filled will take us a certain distance. We have faith that the amount of money we have in our back pocket is going to cover the costs of the trip. And when we press on that brake pedal, because we're going to need to press on that brake at some point, that vehicle is going to stop. We just have faith that stuff is just going to happen. A car, like on a long trip, is a tool that we use to get to our destination. And just like in our life, we have many tools at our disposal in our faith walk. But what happens when things don't go as planned? When our expectations don't match reality? We often find ourselves frustrated and unprepared, stressed out. So I'm going to show a picture here. It's good. It's kind of humorous, but it's an image of reality. When we first start off as Christians, our expectation is the top picture. We are excited. We are pumped up. We think, oh my gosh, this is the best feeling I've ever had in my whole entire life. It's so great. And then life comes by and smacks you across the face with a 2x4. And the bottom picture is what reality looks like. The question is, how do we handle the bottom? How do we handle that? Because the top is not what we expect, is not reality. So how do we handle the bottom? I want to make a point that these challenges that you see there are not a sign of failure, but it is an integral part of your journey. I believe that God wants to refocus our vision here because these challenges help shape our character. They deepen our trust in God, and they provide opportunities for spiritual growth. Embracing these types of difficulties with faith allows us to see them not as setbacks, but as a step towards deepening our relationship with Him. Because there are times we're going to have to do some rock climbing, zip lining, going through the forest, taking a boat, over bridges. We're going to have storms in our life. You're going to have to climb up a ladder, and don't fall off it like I did last year. And you're going to see difficulties in life, and that's the reality of our faith. The purpose of this message is to help us refocus how we see and react to the reality of faith. So I'm going to talk about the first one, detours. They are unexpected changes in direction that take us off our planned route. They can be frustrating, but you know what? They're not always that bad. So imagine you're planning a beautiful trip. You got everything packed. You got all your money. You got the route planned. You got everything, gas tank filled up. You know where you're going. But as soon as maybe you're halfway through, you hit a detour sign. The main road is closed. I'm sure a lot of us have experienced that. And now you're forced onto this side road, country roads, something that is winding, takes you into different areas that you've never been before. Initially, that may feel frustrating. You might feel scared. You might have doubts. This detour adds time to your trip and takes you through unfamiliar territory. However, as you begin to drive, you notice the scenery. It's a little bit different. It might be breathtaking. It might be beautiful. And all this stuff, all of that scenery, you may have missed it if you wouldn't took the main road. And maybe you pass through a small town. You discover hidden viewpoints, attractions. You experience maybe a local culture in a way you've never experienced before, and you would have never expected. Our faith journey can kind of be the same thing, where detours can seem frustrating. They disrupt our plans and challenge our patience. But often they lead to new opportunities and growth. They take us on the scenic route, where things typically don't, it's typically where we don't get to see things we normally see. We gain new life experiences, expand our knowledge, and witness God's handiwork in unexpected ways. And though inconvenient, life's detours can enrich our journey and strengthen our faith. So let's consider a biblical story here of Joseph. So I'm not going to read all 13 chapters of Genesis that it talks about his life, but I'm going to give you the 10,000-foot view here. He went from being in a loving family with brothers that chose to then to be mad at him and sold him into slavery. And then being put on the slave trade to Egypt. Through the process, he was imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit. To then being elevated to second in command next to Pharaoh. Talk about a detour. This detour enabled him to save Egypt and the surrounding communities from a 7-year famine. And it also allowed him to help his brothers and his family in their time of need. Each detour he had was a part of God's plan, preparing for Joseph for a greater purpose. And in Genesis 45, 5-8, it says, this is Joseph talking to his brothers after he finally revealed himself. So they didn't recognize him when at this time, and he finally revealed himself to them. He said, don't blame yourself because you sold me here. It was God who sent me ahead of you in order to save lives. The famine now has endured for 2 years, and the land will not bear fruit for 5 more years. God sent me ahead of you to ensure that you would live and have descendants. He has saved your lives through this marvelous act of deliverance. So it was God, not you, who sent me here. So Joseph had this amazing attitude in the face of life detours. In the depths of despair, he most likely questioned life. When he was sitting in prison, when he was sitting in the slave trade van, the tent, whatever, the caravan, he was probably questioning life. Like, why am I even here? But he didn't hold any resentment or blame for the things that happened. He realized that God has sent him ahead of Egypt, sent him ahead to Egypt to save lives. And Joseph saw God's purpose in his trials and understood that his position was a part of God's plan to save his family and others. The detours we face can help us grow in ways we never imagined. Like I said before, it may expand our knowledge. It might give us new experiences. We might learn a new habit or a new skill set along the way. We often feel frustrated and discouraged when we hit those detours. And sometimes we even may want to turn back. But it's important to remember that the detours still lead us to our destination. You know that? Detours still lead you to the final, to what God has called you to do. It just may take a little longer. So when we face detours in our faith walk, we got to remember that God is taking us on the scenic route. It's kind of a nice little way of putting it. But along the way there, he guides us and leads us. So I ask that you don't be deterred because your journey is just taking a little bit longer than you thought it was going to be. Our expectations, like that picture showed, our expectations are not always the plan that God has for us. So while detours reroute us and keep us moving forward in our destination, delays are just a little bit different. Delays are almost like complete stoppages. They can definitely feel frustrating because they stop our progress. They leave us feeling stuck and unable to see what is blocking our way. So like you just think of a traffic jam. When you're in a traffic jam and there's a whole row of cars in front of you, miles ahead, you don't know what's stopping you. You just know you're stopped. And how frustrating that is to sit there with your engine running and you're just stopped. You don't know. You don't know what it is. That is when our patience is truly tested. James 1:2-4 says, "My fellow believers, when it seems as though you face nothing but difficulties, see it as an invaluable opportunity to experience the greatest joy you can." Yikes. "For you know that when your faith is tested, it stirs a power within you to endure all things. And then your endurance grows even stronger. It will release perfection in every part of your being until there is nothing missing and nothing lacking." And I'll touch on endurance in a little bit. Delays in our faith journey can be a way of God strengthening us, our perseverance, and deepening our reliance on Him. Delays may represent a shut door. And it requires us to make a new path, like a detour. Sometimes delays are God's clearing the way in front of us. Because you don't know what, if you're in a traffic jam, you don't know, there could have been a horrible accident in front. There could be a fire. There could be something going on that God is saying, hey, stop for a minute. Like, I need you to stop. Because whatever's ahead of you is going to hurt you. Delays will test our endurance and strength, pushing us to develop new habits or routines that align more closely with God's will. They may require us to develop an attitude of gratitude, finding joy in thanksgiving, as James 1 stated. This renewal of the mind, this development of character, this development of attitude of gratitude, this renewal of the mind, like Romans 12:2 states, transforms our perspective, allowing us to see delays not as setbacks, but as opportunities for patience, being okay with the silence, and deepening our trust in God's plan. So when you find yourself facing a complete stoppage, remember that it's not a sign of failure. Although it's difficult in the midst of it all, embrace it as a part of your journey. Doing this shows that we know God is working in the waiting. He's clearing our path. He's building your character and preparing us for what's ahead. Delays definitely test our patience, but they also can go hand in hand with the decisions we must make along the way, and that's the third D, decisions, where we learn from our mistakes. Just as delays can leave us feeling stuck, decisions can leave us feeling uncertain and overwhelmed. The choices we have an insane impact on our journey. So, raise of hand here, who has made a bad decision in their life? Dave is shaking his head no. I love you, Dave. Wrong decisions typically happen when we try to do it ourselves. When we're like, you know what, God? I'm just going to do this myself, and we'll see what happens. And usually it's not good. That's when we know better than the map or the GPS system. So I have a little short story here. So when Katrina and I were younger in our marriage, she was about 6 months pregnant, and we were going to go visit our friends down in Virginia. Well, I did not know that I-65 was closed down for reconstruction. So this is probably about 2008. So it's like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're driving through Chicago. And we're driving down, and I think it was I-90 and 65 merge. And I see the detour sign for I-65, and I'm like, my phone in 2008, so I'm using a Navigator GPS system on my 2008 phone. So this is back when GPS and phones were in their infancy. And my GPS is like, no, I-65 is open. It wasn't updated. I didn't know that. So I got to I-65, and it's closed. So I turn around, and I'm trying to find this detour, and I cannot find this detour. So I made the wrong choice of saying I'm going to trust my GPS that wasn't updated and not follow the signs that are telling me to go a different way. I can't find that detour sign. I'm literally in Gary, Indiana at this point at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we pull off, and there's a gas station. And I'm like, I need to get out of here. And it's bulletproof glass. Like, I'm like 22. You know, it's hilarious now that I think about it. But she's 6 months pregnant on top of it all. And I'm in Gary, Indiana, of all places. And I finally get on the highway, and we go to Gurnee, Illinois, just to stay the night. And we figure it out after that. But I didn't end up going to Virginia. I was too scared already to begin with, so I just, whatever. So, I just turned around. I'm like, I'm done. So for the longest time, I didn't trust GPSs at all. So what I ended up doing was I ended up going on my computer and printing off directions to and from my location back home because I did not trust GPSs on my phone. Oh, super paranoid. But we've all made bad decisions here that take us on the path that we did not intend to go. Maybe it took down roads where we felt lost, confused, maybe in danger or lonely. And I stated this before, but these types of decisions teach us a lesson, a very hard lesson, some lessons that take years to learn. Recovering from bad habits or trauma in your life takes a very, very long time. But being aware of the poor choices is key. We can see so many examples of biblical heroes that made bad choices. One, Adam and Eve. That's why we're struggle. Abraham, who decided to, speed up the process of getting a child ahead of God's plans. Moses, he killed a guy. David did the same thing. And he committed adultery. And Peter, he just chopped an ear off of a soldier. But all these people were used by God still, despite their bad decisions. So that shows us proof time and time again that God can take our wrong turns and use them for good. Romans 8:28 says, "We are convinced that every detail of our lives is continually woven together to fit into God's perfect plan of bringing good into our lives. For we are his lovers who have been called to fulfill his designed purpose." We are going to face decisions, hard decisions. It's all a part of the journey. And I encourage you that if you have made decisions and not the right decisions. I encourage you to learn to forgive yourself and practice self-care in those. Remember that God's grace is super abundant, because God will never shame you, nor will he ever guilt you. And I pray we can all learn from our errors and trust that God can even use our wrong turns for his glory and your good, because there is hope in all this. The last D I want to talk about is discipleship. And that is the cost of our faith. So Autumn preached an amazing sermon on the cost of discipleship back on June 23rd. So go to our website, check that out. It's called The Cost of Discipleship. I highly encourage you to watch that. I'm not going to dive too much into the cost of discipleship, because I want you to go back and listen to that, because it's matches up great with this. But what I will say about discipleship is that there will be a cost. Just like any trip. When you're planning a trip, there's a cost associated with that trip. It's going to cost time with God, and time with others, which I'm going to cover here shortly. Might cost money. Our discipleship walk, our faith walk might cost money, comfort, maybe persecution. But in the end, it's all worthwhile. So, what do we do with all this? Well, I just covered the 4 Ds: detours, delays, decisions, and discipleship. There are challenges along the way that will trip us up in our faith walk. But here's the thing. They are all required. You will not escape them. It's part of life. You will not escape them. If you want to sit on your blessed assurance and just chill and not do a thing, your faith will not grow. It's just like if you want to go to the gym. If you don't go to the gym and lift weights, you're not going to get muscle. If you want to have a great marriage but down-talk your spouse, you're not going to have a great marriage. If you're trying to start a business and you just don't do anything with it, your business isn't going to grow. It's just like our faith. Everything that we do, whether you want to have a successful marriage, you want to lose weight and get in shape, you want to build a business, it all will encounter difficulties. But encountering those difficulties allows us to pursue greatness. We might as well welcome them with open arms. All the difficulties, might as well just say, hey, here they are. Okay. That is why I spoke about them. Understanding their purpose and learning about them will help you kind of just roll with the punches. But when you're in the midst of it all, it's easy to say, oh, just trust in God, or just pray. Or like I just said before, just roll with the punches. It's easier to say than done. And you're probably saying, what if I'm in the middle of everything? Well, how does this help me when I'm in the middle of everything? What if I can't see beyond the roadblock? What if I don't trust this detour? How do I know if I'm on the right path? I want you to hold on to those questions just for a moment. I touched on what Jesus said about faith in the introduction. And one of our core values here is Jesus. We learn from him to live like him, so let's learn. Matthew 17:20. If you have faith inside of you, no bigger than the size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move away from here and go over there, and you will see it move. There's nothing you couldn't do. And usually when I heard this verse preached, it was under the guy saying, all you need is a mustard seed of faith, a small amount of faith to move the mustard, or to move the mountain. If you want to move mustard, that's fine. Too many M's here. Oh yeah. But what I was saying here is, I heard it a lot, is all you need is just a small amount of faith to move that mountain. And if that mountain is moving, you don't have enough faith. It's because you need more faith. And that hurt. That hurts. Because that's not how it works. But as I prayed and read and dug deeper, this verse means so much more. Jesus talks about a mustard seed. Do you understand the size of a mustard seed? That's the size of a mustard seed compared to a penny. It is a 1/32 to 3/32 of an inch in diameter. Depending on where they're growing, at maturity, they can grow up to 30 feet tall. Just from that one seed. That's huge. What I really want to emphasize here, and I believe what Jesus is pinpointing, is that we don't need a large daily faith to move mountains. Let me rephrase that. We don't need a large daily faith to move a mountain. We just need to have a little bit of faith every day. Because just like that seed, every day it slowly progresses and slowly grows in its persistency. And it will grow into this massive tree. And that little bit of faith, under consistent perseverance, it grows. It grows to move mountains and provide fruit for others. A moment ago, I told you to hold on to those questions of being in the thick of it all. And if you've never read James 1, actually the whole book of James, there's only, I think, 4 or 5 chapters. Read it. It's amazing. And I ask that you put it to memory because there's so much wisdom in that book. And here's where we get to the application. So I'm talking about perseverance, growth, endurance, all this faith. We're facing all these difficulties. How do we persevere and how do we grow? How do we endure? James 1:5-8 says, "And if anyone longs to be wise, ask God for wisdom and he will give it. He won't see your lack of wisdom as an opportunity to scold you over your failures, but he will overwhelm your failures with his generous grace. Just make sure that you, empowered by confident faith, without doubting that you will receive. For the ambivalent person believes 1 minute and doubts the next. Being undecided makes you become like a rough seas, driven and tossed by the wind. You're up 1 minute and tossed down the next. And when you are half-hearted and wavering, it leaves you unstable. Can you really expect to receive anything from the Lord when you're in that condition?" Our faith grows through endurance, through patience, through persistently asking for wisdom. But what if our endurance is not just meant pushing through the pain? What if it doesn't mean just that? But what if it means naming the pain, feeling the pain, and processing the pain? And not alone. Maybe the wisdom spoken in this verse, God can give to you through other people. This is the cost of discipleship. Having people in your life that you can trust to help you endure and persevere is just equally as important as your relationship. Well, your relationship with God is the most important, but that horizontal alignment, your friends, you got your vertical alignment with you and God, and you got your horizontal alignment, that is just as important. Sometimes, some things we can process and solve on our own with God. While other struggles, we need other people. We need friends. Maybe the reason we start to drown, kind of like Peter did when he stepped on the waves, is because we start to doubt and we feel like we're all alone and we feel like we can't do it. We start drowning and Jesus is saying, here's my hand. Those people that I place in your life right now, that's my hand to pull you up out of the waters, to pull you up out of the mud. Those people I place in your life, they are acting in my place. And that's why relationships are so important. If we isolate and try to figure it out on our own, we start to doubt, we become wishy-washy, flip it all over the place. There's no consistency. And if we are like this, how can we expect God to trust us in the next step of our journey? As Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 says, 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help, but someone who falls alone is in real trouble. So, remember the 4 Ds. They are required to grow. It's all about our mindset to process all of this. James 1:12 says, if your faith remains strong, even while surrounded by life's difficulties, you will continue to experience the untold blessings of God. True happiness comes as you pass the test of faith and receive the victorious crown of life promised to every lover of God. And keep that verse on the screen, please. This is just so good right here. If your faith remains strong. If. Even while surrounded by life's difficulties, you will continue to experience the untold blessings of God. God's blessings are untold. They haven't even been realized yet. How many times have you heard an incredible story, watched this amazing movie of this hero that overcome all the obstacles? How do you feel after you watch that movie? You feel empowered, don't you? You feel victorious. Maybe it's a story of somebody in your life that had this amazing story and it's just so good. But if they didn't persevere through it, you would never heard that story. That story was completely unwritten until they persevered through it, until they endured through it. It was completely unwritten, untold. There's portions of your story that's untold. And we must go through the detours, delays, decisions, and costs to have it unfold. And the blessings that are spoken about are not always materialistic. They can be. But maybe they are a comforting word. Joy, peace, patience. Maybe a phone call that you're waiting for. A hug. A letter. Car not breaking down. A negative diagnosis. And moving on in James 1:12, it says, it speaks of true happiness. Where true happiness comes as you pass the test of faith and receive the victorious crown of life promised to every lover of God. Oh, it's awesome. Because God only supplies true happiness, not external stuff, not external validations. It's only through God. So how do we receive this? How can we pass the test of faith and receive the victorious crown of life? I have 2 application points that I want to leave you with. Prayer and worship. That's how we receive the victorious crown of life. That is how we pass the test of faith and endure. Autumn spoke on radical worship last week, and you should check that one out too. That was really good. I love the analogy in that one. So the first application point, pray. Pray fervently, even when you don't feel like it. Even when you're in the middle of it. Pray. Ephesians 6:18 says, pray passionately in the Spirit as you are constantly intercede with every form of prayer at all times. James 5:16, tremendous power is relieved through passionate, heartfelt prayer of a godly believer. Not a whimsical prayer, not just a prayer. Heartfelt and passionate prayer. 1 Thessalonians 5:17, make your life a prayer. Your entire life a prayer. What does that mean? Pray fervently, always, never ceasing. Pray. Never stop praying. Whether you are angry, happy, sad, miserable, pray. Prayer doesn't have to be hard. It's just a conversation between you and God, and have this daily. The next application point, worship radically, even when you don't feel like it. Notice the trend here? Not just when you're happy, but when you don't feel like it. Because when you worship from a place of gratitude, it changes everything. When we praise a God that doesn't change and we worship from a place of gratitude and thanksgiving, it changes our entire perspective. Sometimes our perspective isn't changing because we're not worshiping, we're not praying. But it doesn't change our circumstances. Those are going to stay the same. But it changes how you see life in those circumstances. Gratitude is being thankful for the good things in your life. And it helps us with understanding the reality of that picture that I showed. So if you gotta climb mountains, God's gonna give you climbing gear, a boat to cross an ocean, zip lining. He will supply you to get through those. We worship a God who has blessed us with here, amazing church family. I love all you guys. The clothes on our back, coffee, friends, a home. I encourage you to spend time in worship, and it doesn't have to be the songs that we sing here. It can be your own words or a song you just make up on the fly. It doesn't have to be in tune. God just cares about your heart. But praising Him and praying to Him for His unchanging nature, His glory, and thanking Him for all the good things in your life. Prayer and worship is how we endure and persevere through the detours, delays, decision, and discipleship in our lives. Those four are inevitable, and they are the reality. We need to persevere through the ups and the downs, so we might as well just throw up our hands and praise Him again and again. Because we know who we have in our corner. And we know that if we endure and put our focus on Jesus, that little seed of mustard faith, that little seed, if that is done consistently day in and day out, that will continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. And your story, that untold story of your life, your faith walk, will bless other people. You just have to endure. And that will move mountains. Let's pray. God, I thank you for your unchanging and consistent nature. God, I just thank you that, as ironic as it sounds, I thank you for the difficulties, because it grows my spirit and it grows my connection with you and my relationship with you, Lord. And I pray as we endure these that we can find favor in you and favor in some close relationships and friends. Lord, that you bless the path, you bless the road. Lord, you direct our paths. Lord, because life hits us. And Lord, I pray that we can just pray and worship and thank you through it all, as difficult as it may be. Lord, I pray that our faith can grow daily, even if it's still the size of a mustard seed. Lord, that's all we need every single day. Lord, I worship you. And I thank you for your amazing nature and how much you love us. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.